Well, for more on this issue, I'm joined by Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Scott Hargreaves. Scott, thanks for your time tonight. You heard what we revealed in my editorial there about phrases such as Chinese whispers, gone walkabout, no can do, now being suggested as racially offensive by the ABC. What did you make of that?
Well, as you say, it's all about priorities. In any workplace, people are entitled to be treated with respect, and any instances of actual racism should be abhorred. But what we're seeing here, what you've provided the audience with, Caroline, is a window into the woke obsessions of the inner city elites that actually drive the agenda within the ABC. You've lifted the bonnet on the sort of things that they're worried about day in, day out. And why they're worried about these things, they're not actually focused on their core mission, which is serving the Australian public, actually being a national broadcaster which reflects our national diversity in all its elements. Instead, it is an extremely narrow agenda built around DEI and grievance politics and identity politics. And that's what these leaked documents really reveal. And as you say, I loved your work actually questioning the so-called language guidelines. If our national broadcaster, which should have a facility with the English language greater than the average institution, can't even work out what these phrases mean or purport to mean, then we really do have a problem.
What chance does anyone have, really? Now, we also revealed there that staff were invited to this Transgender Day of Remembrance workplace event this week, yet there was no such event for Remembrance Day on Monday. I don't want to beat down on people who identify as trans. That's not what this is about. But what do you think most Australians would think of the fact there wasn't an actual Remembrance Day event, and yet there's one that's being held for this very small group?
Oh, they'd be hugely disappointed. It's not dishonouring the people who've made enormous sacrifices, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice for the Australian people, and they're not being honoured, they're not being remembered. But we do see, as you say, the Transgender Day Remembrance, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But this is the ABC that we're talking about, and under the National Charter, they're actually meant to contribute as a national broadcast to our sense of national identity. And what was more central to our sense of national identity than the Anzac experience, the First World War, our first expeditionary force as a nation, and then Remembrance Day, which brought that terrible war in which so many sons and daughters of Australia died. That is central to our national identity, but the ABC is not interested in that. They'd rather let the staff collective drive the agenda by saying our most important thing to think about this week is Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Well, you mentioned the charter there, and let's be honest, lots of commercial organisations these days have this kind of radical DEI stuff. But the problem is that it's taxpayers who are funding it when it comes to the ABC. The broadcaster's own annual report this year revealed it spent a record $1.1 billion, more than that actually, in public funds, even as audience numbers have declined across most platforms. Yet ABC Chair Kim Williams says they need more funding to tell Australian stories. I'm taking a wild guess here, Scott, but you don't agree with that, do you?
No, well, there's two aspects to that. The first is this DEI agenda. It has been a feature of corporations, of even Australian corporations, until recently. It has to be said, Caroline, that they are running a million miles from this. The new catchphrase that's increasingly being spoken about, get this, merit and excellence. It'd be great if the ABC actually started to focus on merit and excellence of its people, and having broadcasters that people actually want to listen to, reporters who are actually able to present news, rather than chasing their diversity, equity and inclusion points. And Kim Williams is half right, Caroline. What is important is our Australian way of life. We do need Australian stories too. The ABC used to be very good at that. As one of the great cultural institutions telling Australian stories. We do need more of them. We don't want to be just an offshoot of America or Europe. We are a nation of our own. But the ABC is the last institution in the world that I would be giving money to tell Australian stories, because they will put everything through their DEI lens, which apart from anything else makes for extremely boring programs, which is why the ratings are going so down.
Yeah, exactly. And it does explain the declining numbers in part. Well, this report also revealed some of the ABC's top brass received pay bumps, and that's despite these declining audience numbers that we talk about and the so-called funding gap. That doesn't wash with taxpayers, does it? And nor does it, I imagine, wash with the staff members at the ABC.
Well, that's right. Another one of these top-heavy government organisations that we see in Canberra. But in this case, again, we're in a context where they've managed to alienate their own audience. They've managed to depart from their charter. If they are going to argue for getting money from hard-working Australians, and it's questionable whether they even should exist in the current form, but if they're going to be out there putting their hand out for money, Australians will be entitled to ask, what are they getting for it? And if those executives actually had performance-linked pay, they wouldn't be getting pay rises. They would be either getting pay cuts or on the way out the door. Caroline, journalists in your organisation have to perform. Wonderful team. If you're not breaking news, if you're not reporting news, if you're not bringing an audience to the programs, well, generally that's pretty career limiting. But at the ABC, you get rewarded for it. All you got to do is keep asking for more money and engage in a bit of grievance politics, and you got a job for life.
We saw some of that grievance. The response that the spokesperson gave us for asking questions was to have a crack at News Corp, of course, because they can't possibly have scrutiny despite getting $1 billion a year in public funding, can they? Now, the ABC also took a hit to its credibility following the revelation that fake gunshots were added to a story they ran about war crimes in Afghanistan. Scott, where does something like this leave their credibility now?
Well, this is the irony of constantly using the advertising slogan that they're the most trusted news source in Australia. If they were the most trusted news source in Australia, perhaps more Australians would actually go to it to get their news. But they're actually, again, their audience share is shrinking. And it's partly because of episodes like this, where we see again and again bias, tedious programming, woke obsessions, and in this case, really a smoking gun about what is going on inside that organisation. To reuse the phrase, it's a look under the bonnet of how things are done inside the ABC, and in a very non-transparent way. And whenever they're exposed, they're extremely defensive. Nothing to see here. Please move on. You guys at News Corp, you're just trying to take shots at the ABC. But in this case, they have been held dead to rights, and no one's been accountable for it.
Yes, well, we're definitely holding them to account tonight. Scott Hargreaves, thank you so much for your time tonight.